These aren't urban legends. They're true stories that happened to night clerks on lonely roads across the country. I was working the overnight shift at a roadside hotel just off the highway. It was one of those small places, 30 rooms, faded carpets. The kind of lobby where the clock ticking on the wall is the loudest sound after midnight. Most nights were quiet. Truckers, tired families, the occasional salesman. Nothing unusual. But this night, it was different. Around 11 p.m., a man came in. He was alone, carrying nothing but a small wallet in his hand. No bags, no suitcase, no jacket despite the cold outside. He didn't speak much, just asked for a room. His voice was flat, almost rehearsed. I remember feeling uneasy as I checked him in, but I brushed it off. People are tired and strange at that hour, I told myself, but what unsettled me most was that he didn't go to his room. I watched the security monitor behind the desk, expecting him to head upstairs. Instead, he lingered. He walked down one hallway, then stopped. He stood at the stairwell for a while. Later, I saw him standing by the bathroom door. Then, just in the lobby, staring at the vending machine. Hours passed, and he never once used his keycard. Asterisk at first. I tried to ignore him. Guests wander sometimes. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he was waiting for someone. But as the hours dragged on, it became harder to explain away. Around 1 a.m., I checked the system out of curiosity. His room still showed as vacant. The bed untouched, the lights off. I frowned, thinking maybe I'd made a mistake. I pulled up the records. Nothing. No payment. No authorization. No entry at all. According to the system, no one had checked in. My stomach sank, and still, there he was. I'd glance up from the desk and see him in a different place. Once by the corner of the hall, just standing half in shadow. Another time at the glass doors, his reflection staring back at me as he watched the empty parking lot. He never spoke. He never looked directly at me. But I could feel him watching. Around 3 a.m., I finally picked up the phone and called my manager. As the line rang, I kept my eyes on him. He stood near the stairwell, his head tilted ever so slightly, like he could hear the conversation. I whispered what was happening. My manager told me to call the police. That's when the man turned, slowly, and for the first time that night. He smiled. Asterisk. When the police finally arrived, I felt a wave of relief until I realized the man was gone. I swore I'd seen him by the stairwell only seconds before. The officers swept the building, checked the halls, the bathrooms, even the boiler room. Nothing. Then one officer came back to the desk, holding something in his hand. A credit card. He asked me if it belonged to the man. It did. That's what he'd used to pay with earlier. But when they ran it, it came back stolen. And then came the part that made my blood run cold. The officer told me there was no record of him ever checking in. No ID, no paperwork. Not even a fake name. He was never a guest at all. The only evidence that he'd been there were my own eyes and the hours I'd spent watching him drift through the hotel like he belonged. That was years ago. And even now, every time I walk a quiet hallway or hear footsteps where there shouldn't be any, I remember him. The man who wasn't a guest. Asterisk. My name's Meredith. And when this happened, I was 24 years old, working the overnight shift at a gas station off a lonely stretch of highway. It wasn't a big place to pumps, a small convenience store. A couple of flickering fluorescent lights buzzing over the counter. At night, the store always felt too quiet. You notice every little sound, the cooler humming, the creak of the door when someone comes in, even the crickets outside when the traffic dies down. We had regulars, truckers mostly, people passing through on long trips. And then there was him. He wore a green coat, always zipped all the way to his chin, no matter the weather. Mid-40s, graying at the temples, thin frame. The kind of guy you wouldn't remember unless you had to, except he made sure I did. The first few nights, he came in like anyone else. Bought a coffee, maybe a pack of gum, barely spoke. But then, slowly, he started saying things that unsettled me. He used my name. Not from my Namato guide stopped wearing it weeks before. The way he said it wasn't casual, either, like he'd been waiting to use it. Asterisk at first, I laughed it off. Maybe he'd heard my boss say my name. Maybe he saw it on a receipt. But then, it kept happening. He'd say it every time he walked in. Always soft, like we were old friends. Then came the little details. He once said, "You write your sevens with a line through them, huh?" I noticed things like that. I froze. I did write my sevens that way, but I had only ever done it on the notes I left for myself behind the counter. He should never have seen them. Another time, he said, "You're not usually here on Mondays. You trade shifts with Lisa, right?" My stomach dropped. I hadn't told anyone outside of work about my schedule. After that, I started seeing his car, parked just outside the edge of the lot. Lights off, engine running. He wouldn't come inside. He'd just sit there, watching, sometimes for 10 minutes, sometimes for hours. Once, when I left my shift at dawn, I found a single rose on the hood of my car. Another time, a piece of scrap paper with random letters, circled letters that, when strung together, spelled my name. That was the first night I stopped feeling safe at work. Every creak of the glass doors made me flinch. Every pair of headlights pulling in made me hold my breath, praying it wasn't him. But it almost always was. Asterisk one night, around 2 a.m., I looked up from the counter and saw him again. His car was parked just beyond the light of the pumps, headlights off. But this time, he wasn't inside. He was standing by the glass door. I don't know how long he'd been there, just watching me through the window. He didn't move, didn't knock, didn't try to come in. He just stared. That was the night I called the police. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely dial. They told me to lock the doors and stay inside until someone arrived. I hid behind the counter, peeking over just enough to see if he was still there. He was. By the time the squad car pulled in, he'd slipped back into his own vehicle, like nothing had happened. The officer spoke to him in the lot while I watched from inside. After a few minutes, they waved me out. I didn't want to go, but I forced myself. They showed me what they'd found in his car. A spiral-bound notebook, crammed with page after page of messy handwriting. It wasn't random, every entry was about me. My name, written over and over. My work hours, my days off, even what color shirts I wore. He'd described when I left the store, who I talked to, how long my breaks were. Some of the entries ended with the words, "She didn't see me this time. I couldn't breathe. The police let me press charges. I got a restraining order. Management transferred me to a different station closer to the city. He wasn't allowed near me again, but even now, years later, whenever I drive home at night and a pair of headlights stays too close behind me, I feel it, that same cold prickle on the back of my neck. because he once told me, with that half smile, I just notice things, and I wonder if somewhere out there he still does. Asterisk, I was 22 when this happened, working weekend overnights at a small 24-hour gas station. Out there, it felt like the middle of nowhere, just a two-lane road, a couple of flickering streetlights, and the hum of the neon open sign in the window. Most nights dragged on forever. It was usually quiet, just a few late-night travelers grabbing snacks or filling up. But one night, my coworker and his friend pointed something out that immediately unsettled me. There was a car, a brand new sedan, so clean it practically gleamed under the parking lot lights, but it didn't have any license plates. Not temporary tags, not dealer plates. It just sat there, idling with its lights off, and someone was inside. We could see the silhouette of a man in the driver's seat. He wasn't on his phone, wasn't moving, just watching the store. Asterisk, we tried to brush it off at first. Maybe he was waiting for someone. Maybe he'd pulled into the wrong lot. But after an hour, he was still there. Engine running. Lights off. Just sitting, my coworker decided to confront him. He walked up to the car with his friend while I watched nervously from inside. The man rolled down the window only a few inches. His face was hard to make out, just shadows. When my coworker asked if he needed help, the man said flatly, "Wrong address," and drove off. We thought that was the end of it, until another brand new car pulled in. Same make, same color. No plates. It idled for a few moments, then slowly pulled out of the lot, following the first car into the night. My coworker and I exchanged a look neither of us could explain. Two identical cars with no plates, back to back, both lurking at our station. Something about it felt wrong. Later that night, after my coworker left and I was alone on shift, I noticed headlights sweep across the lot again. My stomach dropped. It was the same car as before. This time, it didn't just sit out front, it parked just beyond the reach of the cameras, tucked into a blind spot where the glass windows couldn't see either. A couple customers came in during that time. One of them, a trucker, leaned over the counter and said quietly, "You know there are two guys arguing inside that car, right?" That was when I realized what scared me most. Whoever they were, they knew exactly where to park so no one could watch them. Asterisk, I kept glancing at the security monitors, praying they'd move into frame, but the car stayed perfectly hidden in that blind spot. The minutes dragged. Every time the doorbell above the entrance chimed, I jumped, expecting it to be them. But they never came inside. Instead, they just waited. I couldn't see them, but I could feel it like eyes pressing through the walls of the store. I busied myself with stocking shelves, pretending I didn't notice, but every sound made me flinch. The hum of the fridge, the tick of the clock. Even my own breath sounded too loud, and then, nothing. At some point, I realized the headlights were gone. I hadn't even seen them leave. 1 second they were there, two men sitting in a car with no plates, tucked away where no one could watch them, and the next. The lot was empty. I never saw them again, but that night changed me. I couldn't stop thinking about it, how they knew exactly where the cameras couldn't reach. How they stayed until I was alone, how they waited. For what? I still don't know now. I don't work overnights anymore. But if I ever have to stop at a gas station after dark, I catch myself scanning the lot for cars with no plates. Because I know what it feels like when someone's out there, just sitting in the dark, waiting, and I promised myself I'll never be that vulnerable again. That's why I carry a weapon now. And I never work alone at night. Asterisk.